Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 20 of Outside the Letterbox. I'm Paul Duda,
Hey, I'm Joe Campbell.
I'm Nick Van Shout.
and today we're going to be discussing what we've watched recently. Actually, we're not doing recent film news, we just decided this week. We are going to discuss Kevin Smith's latest film, Tusk. Well, first, you can find more episodes of Outside the Letterbox on our website, the-letterbox.com, and on iTunes by just searching for Outside the Letterbox. Leave us a review or comment on our site. We actually have been away for a while due to an unfortunate accident with the website. Not with any person, thank God. But but we took a bit of a hiatus, but we're back now and we're ready to go. So let's kick it off with what we've been watching recently. And to start that, we're going to go to Joseph Campbell. What have you
Oh,
watched recently?
I watched quite a bit, but I had to narrow it down to just a few. I guess first off, I guess I'll start with the oldest movie that I've seen recently. It's not an old movie, but I watched Filth,
Yeah, I was
starring.
gonna say most of these movies are probably only about a couple months apart from each other.
Well, it's the oldest one on the list of films I'm going to talk about today. It's with James McAvoy. Actually, you know what? I'm really regretting choosing this one as one of my topics because I don't really have a whole lot to say about it. Um, all I know is that on the poster it says from the creators of Train Spotting, and that made a lot of sense to me because it feels a lot like from the creators of Train Spotting, even though Danny Boyle didn't make it. Is it by like the same author of the book or something like that? Does anybody know?
Probably.
I have no idea. Anyway, it's pretty much what the title sounds like. Yeah.
Well, can I ask a question about it? Because
Yeah.
I listened to an interview with the oh no, I was actually in an interview with James McAvoy, and he talked about doing that kind of a character, which for some reason he compared to doing Professor Xavier in the most recent X-Men, just in terms of being in a like sort of a crappy person at the time. But I was just wondering, like he talked about how he didn't really want to do the part like while he was reading the script until like he realized that the movie isn't just like about a bit, to be sort of cheeky about it, a filthy person, that there's a bit of a morality tale to it. Is that accurate, or is it really just about?
It is. I feel like the movie indulges in kind of the depravity of his character so much though that it's almost lost in the movie. But there is, like there is a point to it. I mean, like the whole film is about this cop basically in Scotland, or a detective, I guess, or whatever. And he's fighting for a promotion, and to do so, he's stepping over all his other peers and trying to screw them over and that kind of stuff. Um, so basically, he's just like this terrible, terrible person who has no moral code, just trying to move up in the world at any means, at any price. Um, and it's it's kind of fun to see James McAvoy take a role like this because it is kind of outlandish. It is pretty funny. Jim Broadbent said it too. He's kind of funny in this one. Um, but it's in the end, I feel like because of all the nastiness of his character, again, like the moral of the movie is sort of lost. It's not entirely lost, but you tend to forget about that and just kind of the shock value of certain moments of the film as opposed to the overall value of the movie.
Yeah. Hmm.
So it was entertaining enough, I guess, but it's certainly nothing I'm gonna ever wish to repeat. um,
That's not a very glowing review then.
it isn't, unfortunately. If I had to choose, going back to Train Spotting, if I had to choose between this and Train Spotting, I'd probably watch Train Spotting again. But then again, I really enjoy Danny Boyle's stuff, so maybe it's just his style coming through in that one.
Huh.
Another movie that I watched recently also, though, was a movie that I've been looking forward to for a while, actually, just because of the filmmaker. It's Ty West's The Sacrament. And the only reason I've been looking forward to this is because I really do enjoy a lot of Ty West stuff. He did both The Innkeepers and House of the Devil. He's done a lot of low budget kind of indie horror stuff. He also did a sketch from what was it called? VHS also.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, I forget which one he did in that one, but VHS obviously wasn't one of the best movies I've seen recently, but I seem to remember his one in that being pretty good. He also did a sketch for the ABCs of Death, unfortunately, so he kind of has his hand everywhere right now in kind of the indie horror scene. But anyway, the Sacrament is his first found footage movie outside of VHS, kind of his feature length found footage movie. And I really like what he does with kind of atmosphere and tone in his movies for the most part, especially in House of the Devil. I personally feel that movie runs a little too slowly, but he still does a great job of building up a great atmosphere. You know, that kind of builds up to the climax in that one. I feel like he does that really well in The Innkeepers also. So in The Sacrament is basically it's the Jonestown Massacre as a found footage movie. Essentially, they just changed the names of everything, but it's that's exactly what it is basically. So I guess spoiler alert, kind of. But it's again he does a good job with the material he has. I didn't feel like he had very good material to work with to begin with in this one, just because you kind of see where it's going from the very beginning. I appreciated some of the stuff they do with the characters in this one. I mean, like as opposed to a lot of these kind of low budget horror found footage movies I've seen, a lot of times they just like to kind of put all these characters in the situation and kill them off one by one. Whereas in this one, he does a really good job of making characters that you really enjoy. You really want to see them make it all the way through to the end. They put up a really good fight, so it's kind of like it's more of a hopeful found footage movie than I think a lot of the ones that I've seen before. That being said, the movie isn't a great movie, but it's better than a lot of kind of the straight to DVD or VOD found footage movies I've seen a lot in recent history. So I enjoyed it for what it was as a Ty West movie. And then the final one that I watched also this week was A Walk Among the Tombstones with Liam Neeson, which wasn't one that I was terribly looking forward to. I was kind of more somewhat interested in it more than anything else. I gotta say, I really enjoyed this movie. Actually, it's probably one of my favorite movies this year. It's not my favorite, but it's up there. It's probably in my top 10 as of right now. We'll see if it stays there for the rest of the year. But it's basically it's a similar story, similar vibe to Prisoners, but done as kind of a 90s crime revenge thriller, basically. So it's not as interested in being a really good story. I mean, it's not as interested in being interesting, but it's more interested in being just kind of a tight story with interesting characters. And from beginning to end, it really holds itself together really well. Liam Neeson is great in it. Then again, Liam Neeson is pretty much great in anything he's in these days. But yeah, it's kind of a fun, entertaining, though dark, tightly made movie. So I really enjoyed it a lot.
You should check out. I think I told you this already, Joe, but you should check out Scott Frank's the previous movie he did, The Lookout, with Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
You did mention that. I haven't seen that one yet.
I saw that one probably like 4 or 5 years ago now, and I think it came out almost 10 years ago. But it's really good. It's really good.
Nice, yeah. I should definitely check it out. Considering
you guys should check out.
Stones.
You guys should check out Minority Report because that's a good movie.
Is that one with Joseph Gordon-Levitt or something?
No, dude. But seriously, he wrote Minority Report, or at least
Minority Report. He wrote Out of Sight. He wrote Get Shorty. He's got a pretty good. Ones, yeah. Yeah, he's got a pretty good credit list.
But Minority Report is awesome.
That is awesome. I love Minority Report.
Right. Is that it for you, Joe?
That's all I got. I'm done talking.
Nick, do you want me to go next, or I'll go next, and then Nick can talk because you have better segues to what we're going to talk about in the end.
Okay.
All right. So I haven't watched too much recently. I watched some TV, and I watched Frozen again, but we don't need to talk about that. I watched that with some friends who hadn't seen it last weekend, and then last night I saw The Maze Runner, which I don't think I'll be able to convince you guys to go see in theaters. But I did actually really like The Maze Runner. I enjoyed it more than I enjoyed the first Hunger Games movie, which is saying something because I enjoyed that first Hunger Games movie a lot. But there's something refreshingly dark about this young adult adaptation. You guys have both seen the first Hunger Games movie, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you know how, Joe, I know you're aware of the obnoxious shaky cam in that film, and they do a lot in that first movie to sort of divert the audience's eyes from the violence that is technically going on.
To Divergent their eyes?
No. I haven't seen Divergent yet, so maybe I'll watch that and compare all three. But in this movie they don't do that. You straight up see people getting stabbed straight through, thrown across rooms, thrown against walls. There's some surprisingly violent parts in this movie. More violent than what I was expecting. And the whole mystery behind the movie is pretty interesting. These other movies spend a lot of time, even a movie like Ender's Game, they spend a lot of time setting up this world that these people live in, which is fine because in a lot of sci-fi movies you have to do that, but this movie literally just plunges you right into the story. There's no introduction to the world. There's an introduction to that part of the world, that little part, obviously, but there's no introduction to the entire. We don't even know what year they're living in, really. But that was really interesting to me that they just sort of start the movie, and you're there, you're in the maze, and you don't know what the maze is all about, and it's all about them trying to figure out the maze. I will say the movie suffers from a lot of exposition, and it's got a fairly standard thematic arc about kids who follow, or not kids, but people who follow all the rules versus people who question the rules, which I think they explored in somewhat nuanced ways, but I think you guys would enjoy this movie a lot more than you think you would, to be perfectly honest. There's some cool action in it. There's some gruesome violence, and not super gruesome, but more gruesome than I think you'd expect from this movie. And it's just an enjoyable movie with a sort of interesting premise. I will say the ending sort of sucks.
That's what I've heard. I've heard that the ending doesn't live up to, the mystery that gets built up over the first 2/3 or whatever.
Well, that's it. It doesn't live up to it. They do this weird thing, and this is a spoiler. They do this weird thing where you think they've answered some questions. You think they've answered some questions at the end, with 2 minutes left in the movie, and then there's a scene that immediately takes all those questions and is no, that's not really what's going on. And you're like, wait, hold on, and then it cuts to black.
Yeah, so I haven't seen the movie as a whole yet, but I've seen a couple scenes, a few bits and pieces here and there. And to be perfectly honest, actually out of all of the kind of the YA kind of futuristic movies, I guess, that have been coming out recently. This one does look like to be one of the most interesting to me, I guess. I mean, like I've seen part of the ending, I've seen part of the beginning, but there are a couple things that worry about me, and maybe you can clear this up whether or not they're an actual issue with the movie or not, or whether it's just from like seeing those scenes out of context. It's not really what the issue is. The first thing is that I saw a scene towards the beginning where they're like talking about how like the kids like divide into like different groups, and they give them kind of these hokey names, like oh, okay, those guys are the runners and these guys are the others, and they're kind of based on these cliques of how they're built or what their job is and that kind of stuff, which I feel like we've seen too much, honestly, in a lot of these movies before. Does that come up a lot, or is that something that just kind of is there, passes away, doesn't really bother you in the movie?
I mean, it doesn't. Do you mean specific? Like, how do you mean it comes up in a lot of other movies? Like,
well, I mean, I feel like even a movie like The Hunger Games, you have the different whatever they are the
different districts.
The districts and Divergent, you have the different factions based on your personality or whatever, what your unique ability is.
No, see, yeah, I get what you're saying, but in this, I don't think it's as much of an issue in this.
Okay.
It's not so much like, oh, you're specifically catered to doing this. You're specifically catered to doing this. Like, it's not necessarily like that. And it's not that strict either. And it's definitely not like Divergent, where it's like, oh, you aren't afraid of your fears. You're Divergent. Like that. It's not like that at all. It's mainly just like, oh, you're really good at gardening, then you should help us garden. Like, work the garden. It's like that.
Gotcha.
Or, oh, you're really fast at running, then you should be a runner. So that's more the logic there, and it's not that big of a part. It's shown in the movie that being a runner is kind of like a privilege, because you get to go into the maze and try and figure out what's going on, and you're sort of like the heroes of that little society that they've built. But it's not a huge deal, and it's not like oh, you've been chosen, like some sort of like epic thing. No, that's not. It's funny because the whole like district thing that you mentioned from the Hunger Games kind of comes into play, but not in the same way at all that you're thinking.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, well, and then the other question I had was about because you mentioned how they kind of eschew the shaky cam thing in favor of like actually like showing what's going on the screen and not being afraid to hide it, that kind of stuff. I saw one bit though where they're like fighting one of the crab things, whatever, like those robot monster, whatever they are.
They call them grievers in the movie.
Yeah, yeah, and honestly, I couldn't tell what the hell was going on. I never felt like I got a really good look at the thing, and because the camera was moving around so much and that kind of stuff. So I'm like, does that just come up because you think of the budget of the CG in the movie, or is that kind of consistent with the rest of the movie?
I'd say that's a problem in a couple scenes, but it's not as much of a problem as it is in say other movies, because there's an introduction scene to those creatures that is pretty clear what's going on.
Okay, gotcha.
So it's not like that. There are some moments where there's like I think I know what scene you're talking about, where one of those things is like attacking more than one person, or more of those things attacking more than one person, and because there's so many legs of those creatures and like so many people, it can get a little like, oh, what?
Yeah. Okay, gotcha.
But there's an introductory scene to those creatures that like gives you a really good idea of what they are and what they're capable of. That I don't think like something like The Hunger Games necessarily gives you, where it's just like, oh, she's on top of her. Oh, I think she's choking her. Oh, wait, someone got knocked out.
Someone got decapitated? I can't tell. It's a PG-13 movie.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's like, if somebody's dead in this movie, like, it's kind of clear. So, but yeah, it suffers from a lot of the standard stuff that, YA adaptations do, but I or sorry, YA sci-fi adaptations do.
We've had a whole conversation about this before.
But I still think it's an entertaining movie. It's funny actually. There's an ending shot in the movie that reminded me a ton of what's the Resident Evil, the one that takes place in the desert.
You're not really helping your case there, Paul.
No, I know. I don't think Resident Evil is by any means. I think this is way better than Resident Evil, but it's kind of funny because it looked like, oh, hey, I think I've seen that before. But anyway, you guys don't need to check it out in theaters, but I'd strongly suggest like at least taking the time to watch it at some point.
Yeah.
I'd really like to know what you think.
Yeah, definitely. I'm sure I probably will at some point. Honestly, again, like I'm not dreading this one like I have been Divergent or anything like that. I'm actually somewhat interested in this one. So who knows? Maybe I'll check it out in the next week.
Yeah. All right. I talked for a while about that. Dang. I'm gonna turn it over now to Nick.
All right. That's our letterbox.
Yeah, I'm gonna. So I'm gonna talk from least relevant to most relevant. So I'm gonna start with The Keep, which is a Michael Mann movie. And Michael Mann, for those of you who don't know, he directed Heat, he directed The Insider, Collateral, and The Keep is probably the furthest out of his typical range of a filmmaker. Because with Michael Mann, you're kind of used to, these kind of crime movies or movies that are very reflective of real life or like people doing their jobs and stuff. The Keep though is a World War II sci-fi horror movie. And at first I was really intrigued by it because it opens up with these Nazis in, I think it's Romania, storming into this village and taking over this keep, and then just like weird shit starts happening to them. They start getting killed in like these grotesque 80s kind of ways. But then the movie just keeps going and it literally makes no sense. And I looked it up and I found out that a huge factor in this might be that even though the final product is like 90 minutes long, it originally was supposed to be like 3 hours long. So they're just like huge leaps in logic, and like Ian McKellen shows up as like a Jewish scholar, and I just have no idea what he's doing in the movie or whose side he's on because they jump around so much. The best way I can sum up this movie is it's a movie you would have seen like a clip or two of when you were growing up and gone like, oh, this movie looked really cool. And then when you finally get old enough to actually like rewatch the whole thing, you realize, oh, it still looks cool, but it was a really stupid movie. So I don't know if they'll ever go back and release the 3-hour like director's cut, which I would be interested to check out. But as of right now, it's like a movie that's like I really wanted to like it, but never quite got around to it.
The movie just needed a lot more Scott Glenn flying around shooting lasers out of his eyes or something like that.
See, that's the weird thing. That's the huge thing with like the editing problem, is because Scott Glenn is billed as like the main character, and he doesn't like he's in the beginning a little bit. Like he doesn't show up for 30 minutes, and then he's gone for like another hour. It's like he has like one appearance in the beginning, and then the entire third act.
I think the whole reason he showed up for the movie was just because he was reading it. He's like, this movie makes no sense, but I get a sex scene, so I'll take it.
But yeah, it's a bizarre movie. It's on Netflix for like 3 days. That's why I checked it out, because I knew it was coming off, and that it was a pretty out there weird movie. It's also the movie that convinced me that Ian McKellen has always been an old man in movies. I know, because this movie came out in like '83, and he plays the father to the love interest. And I don't know how
he looks the same.
Yeah, I don't know how old is Ian McKellen right now. I'm gonna look this up because this is gonna.
He's immortal. That's how old he is.
And probably he's a vampire like Nicolas Cage.
He's super duper old.
That is his exact age. Super old.
That's what IMDb says.
He's not. He would have been like in his early 40s when that movie came out.
He's 70 something. It looks like.
Yeah, he's 70 something now, but he would have been in his early 40s when that movie came out, which is weird because his daughter, hang on a sec, is played by an actress who was, let me see,
older than him.
That'd be funny. Only about like 15 years younger than him. So.
Well, wait, hold on. Ian McKellen is 77, but is what the heck? Holy crap! Christopher Lee is 92 years old.
Oh yeah, he's really old.
What?
Yeah.
Bring him back for the new Star Wars.
How is he still alive? I know that on the in the Hobbit movies, one of the reasons he's sitting down in a lot of his scenes is because he's having trouble walking. But dang, man.
They just go ahead and just give him like a huge action scene in the last one, make him like the Sixth Army in the Battle of Five Armies.
He should just be sitting down and spinning a wand over his head.
Yeah, like a floating chair, just like over everybody, hitting everyone with lightning.
I just hope he gets to finish his next metal album before before he dies.
Yes.
Have you guys listened to any of that?
I have.
Oh my gosh. Anyway,
I did like once.
What?
But yeah, so I listened to it once, but that was a long time ago.
Oh, okay.
I think. But yeah, so that's the key. It's really a take it or leave it kind of like if it sounds like something that is interesting to you, like if you like those random 80s, like the monster's cool in it, you know. But otherwise, it just doesn't make sense. So it's like a movie that I would say, if you just want to see like cool visuals and you're working on something else, you can turn it on and then look up every time something cool happens. But otherwise, I don't think it's worth it, especially for a Michael Mann movie, because Michael Mann is one of those directors who's really precise and really good at like working on characters and stuff. And so if it's true and the movie was just butchered beyond what his intentions were, then there's no real point to watch it for that. So it's a curiosity more than anything. Following up on that, a movie that I was always kind of interested to watch, and I was really satisfied with, was David Wayne's They Came Together, starring Amy Poehler and Paul Rudd. And I remember when they first announced it, making it, kind of presenting it as this send-up of romantic comedies. And I think the trailer does a pretty good job of selling the type of humor in the movie, but it goes even further in the actual movie. I haven't seen Wet Hot American Summer. I don't know if you guys have, but I'm assuming it's a very similar type of humor to that.
Oh, really?
It's like, yeah, like things are very literal. Like in the movie's kind of framed with Paul Rudd and Amy Poehler talking about their love story with Bill Hader and Ellie Kemper. And you know how in like reviews of like When Harry Met Sally or like a Woody Allen movie or something like that, they're always like, oh, like New York City, it's like another character. Well, that's something that Paul Rudd and Amy Poehler always bring up. And I think in the end credits, New York is actually is credited as a character in the movie. And then there's like the lovemaking scene where like in movies it's usually dramatic and they're bumping into stuff and whatever, but instead of it, like they're grabbing stuff and just throwing against the wall while they're making out, and it's a very literal send up of all those tropes and cliches of romantic comedies. So I think Paul, of all of us here, I think you'll get the biggest kick out of it. And there's a lot of great cameos, some of which you'll see in the trailer, some of which aren't. So I recommend not looking it up, because it's so worth it when they finally pop up. But yeah, They Came Together. Check it out. It's really, really funny.
I love Wet Hot American Summer, which I actually would say is not a very good movie, but it doesn't mean I don't like watching it, because that movie's hilarious. So
exactly.
Now I really want to check it out. So
yeah. And then following up on that, to kind of segue us into our main conversation. So I've been after watching Tusk, I was like, I haven't seen some of Kevin Smith's movies in a long time. Like last year, I'd rewatched Chasing Amy and Zack and Miri, but it had been a long time since I'd seen like Clerks and Dogma and Mallrats and some of those. So I watched a bunch of those. But the one that stood out to me was Clerks 2. I think Clerks 2 is easily my favorite Kevin Smith movie, and I think it was even the first time I watched it. I remember it being a big improvement on Clerks 1, because Clerks 1 is, I think, the main reason it stands out today is because of its historical significance, especially in the indie movement of the 90s. But Clerks 2, to me, just kind of takes that premise that they had going in Clerks 1 and adds so much heart to it, especially at the end of the movie, that, I think it's the clearest intention of who Kevin Smith is as a filmmaker. Like, he's a guy who, like, he's crude and has a foul mouth, but he really has this big, lovable heart at the center of it. And I think Clerks 2 just embodies all of those characteristics, which obviously is kind of different from what we're going to be talking about in Tusk. But I think of what Phase 1 Kevin Smith was, I think it's his best movie.
Huh. I've never seen Clerks 2. I've seen.
You've seen Clerks 1 though, right?
Yeah, I've seen Clerks 1.
Yeah, I'd recommend checking out Clerks 2.
Oh, that's interesting. I had heard Clerks 2 wasn't nearly as good as Clerks 1, so.
Yeah, that's weird to me because it's like, have you guys watched Clerks 1 recently? When people say that, it's like I don't know how, you know, like looking back at Clerks 1, like I don't think it takes that much to top Clerks 2, and that's not a slight against Clerks 1. I mean, it's very much a product of its time and being a first movie, and I just think that like Clerks 2 takes most of the same ideas and then builds upon them and adds, you know, even better material to it.
I guess that's I don't know. I think most people thought the first Clerks was very like it is sort of not revolutionary, but very different in the way it's just sort of like nothing really happens in it.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'll check it out, I guess.
Yeah, I don't remember a whole lot about Clerks 2, to be honest. I just remember a scene at the end, which I'm sure you know what I'm talking about.
Oh yeah, I do remember what you're talking about. But it's funny is I always find this is either a really good or really bad thing. Is like stuff like that I always forget about until I'm rewatching a movie, which makes it really terrible for me to recommend movies to people.
Yeah, dude, do you remember Trick or Treat, Nick? Did you watch that with us?
Yeah.
Oh, that was so awkward. I was like, oh, there's not that much. Oh, yes.
Come on, everybody.
Anyway, yeah.
I think that says something though about like I don't know, to a certain extent, like those movies. If you remember them, but not for those reasons, it's got to mean that there was more to the movie, I think, than than the negative stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's going to conclude our conversation about what we've watched recently, and that's going to move us right into our discussion about Kevin Smith's latest movie, Tusk. So I'm going to hand it off to Nick because I already know what Joe thinks of the movie.
I don't want to be the first one to talk about it. Well, I mean, I can't do it.
Fine. Joe, what did you think of Tusk?
No, just kidding. No, I quite enjoyed Tusk a lot as a Kevin Smith movie. Yeah, it's so I think the last Kevin Smith movie I saw before this was Red State, actually, which is kind of appropriate considering this is his first movie since Red State, isn't it? Or next movie since Red State?
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is kind of the second of the newer Kevin Smith horror kind of. I really enjoyed it just as kind of a the fact that this movie was made at all just kind of baffles me. The fact that no producer at any point looked at this and told him, "Okay, Kevin, you need to change this scene or cut it down or anything," and he just kind of got away with it. I just find kind of hilarious. I think the movie works because the concept is so incredibly bizarre, and this is what I like to do in my own short films too. Is that I like to take kind of weird but kind of funny concepts, but shoot them as a straightforward movie. Because I feel like he got a lot of humor out of it that way, and he does in this one because the whole idea of the movie of some crazy old guy in Canada who had a bonding moment with a walrus when he was younger, wants to turn a human into a walrus because he's lonely. That's just kind of so out there to begin with that the fact that they shoot it like a straightforward horror movie makes it funnier, especially considering that they're constrained by their budget. This whole movie it's very well shot, but like certain effect shots in the movie, you're watching it and you're just kind of like, okay, this is kind of ridiculous at this point. But Michael, what's his name? The main old guy, Michael. What's his face?
Michael Parks.
Michael Parks. I love Michael Parks. He, the last thing I saw him in was We Are What We Are, actually, and he was great in that. He's great whenever I see him in, but in this one in particular, I feel like he had a lot of fun with this role, kind of playing this really crazy old guy up in the mountains. But he plays it so deadpan and seriously and kind of straightforward that when he does snap and go crazy, it kind of comes out of nowhere and just kind of adds to I guess, charm of the movie, if you can call it that. So I had a I had a blast with the movie. I enjoyed how they ended it, especially. And I really need to listen to the podcast, which is based on now, because I haven't listened to that yet. But I'm guessing it's fairly similar to that.
Okay, Nick, what did you think?
Okay, so so this is one of the biggest WTF midnight madness movies I've seen in a long time. Like it's perfect. Like I think we all saw it at late shows, and I don't know how your guys' audience was, but I remember like just a couple minutes in the movie realizing that it was the perfect audience to see it with, because I think it was a mix of people who were like, oh, we're Kevin Smith fans, so we know what to expect, and then there were Kevin Smith fans who knew what to expect from a Kevin Smith movie, but not this type of Kevin Smith movie. And then there were the people who had no idea what to expect, and just like the whole time were just like, what is going on? Um, I've been trying to figure out how to describe my reaction to the movie because, like Joe, I'm pretty sure I really enjoyed it. I laughed a lot. I got grossed out a lot. Like sometimes in the span of 3 seconds, like I think we'll get into this more in spoilers, but like something would disgust me, and I don't know if it was like as a coping mechanism or because it actually was funny, but like within the span of 3 seconds, I would go from going like ew to laughing out loud. But at the same time, like I wouldn't fault anyone who was like that movie was terrible. But at the same time, like Joe said before, especially compared to some earlier Kevin Smith movies, like this is a pretty well shot movie, especially in those early scenes in the house. Kind of remind me of those old haunted Hammer horror movies that would have starred like Peter Cushing or Christopher Lee. Um, so I very much enjoyed that aspect of it. And Michael Parks, again, like Joe said, Michael Parks is fantastic in it. And my exposure to Michael Parks has mainly been through his work with like Quentin Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez, which is funny because in those movies he only has like 5 minute scenes at a time, where he usually comes in, has a little scene, and then moves on. Um, and so this on top of Red State has made Michael Parks one of my favorite, I guess, character actors is probably the more appropriate term. Um, but it's kind of disappointing at the same time because he's giving these great performances, but they're in these genre movies, so it's like he'll never probably get recognition that he deserves for his performances. It'll always just be like, oh, he was, it was that actor who was really good in that Walrus movie. We're never gonna nominate someone like this. So I think that's kind of a shame, but that's. And then there's some other elements I want to talk about, but I feel like getting to spoiler territory, so I think I'll leave it at that for now.
Okay. I I thought this movie was okay. There were entertaining parts to it for sure, and it was funny. It's a very specific kind of movie. Like there's only certain people that I would recommend it to, and that's only if I know their specific tastes. Which I don't know that I think you guys would agree with that.
I'd recommend this to everybody. Families should just take their entire families to go see this movie. It's
Right.
fantastic.
But what I will say is when I got out of the movie, I texted you, Nick, and you said you loved it. Like you were gushing about it, which made a lot of sense to me. Thinking about it, because you also loved Anchorman 2.
What are
Okay.
you saying, Paul?
No, the reason I liked Anchorman 2 for the most part, but the reason I'm bringing it up is that this movie I think has the same in terms of its humor has the same problem where it gives you a joke, but then it drives that joke in so hard, like so hard and for so long that you just want to fall asleep because it's like the joke goes on for way too long.
Okay, can you give an example from this movie without spoiling it yet, or do you want to wait till spoilers to
Yeah,
explain that?
there's a character who's introduced halfway through the movie.
Yep.
Who gets an insane monologue for like that pretty much makes the movie a legitimate length of a movie.
I'm actually going to agree with you there, and without spoiling it. So that this character gets introduced, and I'm sure we'll reveal who he is in spoilers. This character gets introduced halfway through, and he has a monologue. But then it flashes back to another time when he met Michael Parks, and there's another monologue there. That flashback is like immediately like if I were editing the movie or something like that, that would be the first thing to go, because I don't think it adds anything. And for some reason, like I was saying earlier, the movie, it looks like a real step up from most of Kevin Smith's movies visually. That scene looked entirely flat to me, Just I remember from as soon as they cut to it, it was like, oh, there's something off about this scene. And
but even his original monologue without flashing back to, and I agree with you, but I think even his original monologue could have been cut way down, and I'm not kidding about the fact that I think one of the main reasons it was left in is because if it hadn't been, the movie would have been an hour and 20 minutes long.
oh, for sure. I actually almost would have preferred if they had cut that part down and released it as that.
Me too. I totally agree, but I also one the movie. My ultimate feeling about the movie is that it fails because I just got really bored halfway through it. The first half, I mean, Joe can tell you. I think I was sitting next to Joe. Yeah, I was sitting next to Joe in the house. That I was like freaking out. You know, there were only 2 other people in the theater besides us 4.
Oh wow! So you had a really small group.
Yeah.
But in the first third of the movie, I was totally into it. I was like, this is so uncomfortable. I'm freaking out. This is making me nervous. I don't like this. You know, all the, you know, and I actually said that out loud in the theater because I felt that way. And then halfway through, the momentum just goes like, you know.
Yeah.
And I'm just not. I just wasn't interested anymore in what happened. And they like everything that made me uncomfortable, they sort of skipped over and just gave me this sort of goofy Tim Burton-esque horror thing, which was funny, but then like it wasn't funny after the third time they showed it.
That's an interesting point. And then again, this is like, do we go into spoilers or not? Because like it kind of is, kind of isn't. With, I mean, what ultimately happens.
We're basically pulling around it at this point.
I mean, so is there anything else that anyone wants to say before we get into spoilers? Then
no, I just want to surmise really what we thought. So Joe and Nick both really enjoyed it, and you know, thought it was funny. I think it was an okay movie, but I got pretty bored with it, you know, halfway through. So that summarizes what we thought pretty well, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
for the most part.
All right. So yeah, that's gonna conclude that section of our podcast, and we're gonna move into spoilers now. So if you want to see Tusk and you don't want it spoiled for you, I don't know why. I don't know how that would happen because if you know about it, then it's probably already spoiled for you.
Yeah, it's not really a movie that you really care about spoilers, honestly.
But from this moment forward, we're going to be discussing spoilers and plot details for Kevin Smith's Tusk. So you've been warned. All right, so go ahead, Nick.
Okay. So straight up, the guy who appears halfway through the movie is Johnny Depp, which is kind of amusing because I never thought, you know, like Johnny Depp is not one of those people you expect to ever show up in a Kevin Smith movie. So there's that, and I'm kind of of 2 minds with the Johnny Depp appearance, because on the one hand I agree it goes on for too long, but at the same time I feel like it's been an interesting trajectory with Johnny Depp's career, at least for me. I know some other people do not agree with this in the slightest, but like, where first Johnny Depp was like, oh, he was this really interesting actor, and then kind of around Pirates of the Caribbean he kind of hit like his peak, and then it's been slowly like downhill where people were like, oh, he just does the same thing, or it's always like an excuse for him to get in makeup and whatever. And this movie's no different than that, you know, in that he has a thick like French accent and is like under all this makeup, and he's wearing, you know, all these, you know, kind of crazy outfit and whatnot. But for some reason during this movie, it occurred to me for the first time, I don't know if this really makes any of his career choices better, but like I was like, oh, this is him doing like a Peter Sellers. And for some reason that made me like go along with him in the movie, and actually kind of made me excited to see more of like what Johnny Depp does in the future, which was really kind of weird because I'm not a fan at all of his performance in Alice in Wonderland, but I think that might be more just like that whole movie in general. But for some reason, like I feel like I've bought more into Johnny Depp at this phase in his career. Like it feels like we're at the point where he's so far gone into those type of roles that like you either accept it or you don't. And I feel like with this, and then like Mordecai, which I think comes out next year, I'm kind of looking forward to seeing his weird inspector running around in, you know, crazy hats and outfits and mustaches, you know, phase of his career. So I agree that his stuff does go on, you know, too long in the second half, but I think in theory I'm willing to go along with Johnny Depp at this point in his career, whereas before I feel like I was on the same boat as everyone where it was like hit or miss.
Well, Interestingly enough, did you know that both Johnny Depp's daughter and Kevin Smith's daughter are in the movie.
Yeah,
They're
playing clerks appropriately.
exactly.
You know, the biggest problem I have with Johnny Depp's appearance in the movie, and honestly, that is the biggest problem I have with the movie. I mean, like, I love the movie overall, but I feel like his part really brought it down. Honestly, you could have cut his character entirely out of the movie, like not even brought it in, and it wouldn't have made a difference to the movie at all. He really offers something to the movie, but I am really happy he's there, at least, because he is kind of fun and entertaining. The only reason he is there is because because without him, again, like the movie wouldn't be that long of a movie, which I don't think would be a bad thing. But the biggest problem for me is that scene when he's introduced comes right after the big reveal of Justin Long as the Walrus, basically.
That's an interesting thing too, because the placement of the reveal, like I remember thinking about the movie and thinking like, oh, they'll hold off, like it'll be like this slow thing, and then we'll get a big reveal at the end. But the big reveal is like halfway through the movie.
Yeah.
So I don't know if like, do you I mean, does that work for you guys or?
No, that doesn't work for me at all. That's one of my problems with it, is because then it's used almost as a joke / gross out thing 4 more times in the movie, and that just doesn't work.
Yeah. Well, for me, it was interesting because I remember having a similar thought watching. This is a totally random movie to bring up during this, but during The Place Beyond the Pines, there's a similar moment where it's kind of like something happens about halfway through, and all of a sudden you're like, oh wow, well, where is the movie going to go from here? I have no idea like what they could even do with the story from here on, because for me with Tusk, it's kind of like once he had made that transformation, you're just kind of like, oh, okay, well, I have no idea what they're going to do with the rest of the movie. And I was fine with the rest of the Walrus scenes because honestly that first reveal kind of is actually pretty damn disturbing. I was kind of thinking like, oh my gosh, just imagine just being him, in that walrus skin or whatever, just imagine being a human stuck in that situation is really, really terrifying. But then for the rest of the movie, they use it as kind of a bizarre joke, and it becomes really, really funny later on. And they use it for all these kind of gags, later on, which would have worked a lot better, I think, if they had cut down Johnny Depp's scenes significantly. Because a lot of his scenes I do think are really funny. They just go on for way too long. I mean, like for instance, the flashback scene would have worked best if they had cut to that for like 2 seconds, just so you could see Michael Parks, say something, that goofy voice, and then cut away, and that's all we needed to see, and get a good laugh for that. Because I noticed because I noticed also in the theater from the audience, which was just our group and then the other 2 people in there, everyone had great reactions for the first half of the movie. Once Johnny Depp came in the movie, it really kind of subsided a lot. And you heard a lot less of the laughter and the cringes and that kind of stuff, because the movie did lose momentum, which is a shame, because I think the rest of the movie works well. They just really need to cut it down a lot.
Yeah, I guess I'd agree with that. I still think, I'd agree with that. I think that another issue I have is just that the beginning of the movie, the middle of the movie, and the end of the movie have like 3 completely different tones.
That's kind of true. Yeah.
And the strongest parts are definitely the beginning of the movie and the end of the movie, and the middle there is really the big problem of the movie.
And it's, the interesting thing is I didn't have a problem with the dramatic parts in the middle of the movie. And by the dramatic parts, I guess I mean like the parts where, there's that scene where his girlfriend's like crying. It's such a stupid reveal too, because like as soon as you see, like you hear what she's talking about, you're like, oh, she's sleeping with his best friend. Like, it's really obvious,
But it was funny though too. That shot though is so unsettling, because it's like a slow pullback from her face, and I remember like myself and everyone in the theater is just like, something's gonna happen, but we didn't know what. We were like, the camera's gonna like spin around and we're gonna see something, or I don't know what. And so I mean that shot worked in that respect, at least for me, in that like I had no idea what was gonna happen. I didn't know like.
See,
I had a pretty good idea. I was like, oh, it might be Haley Joel Osment, but I was like, what if it's not? What if they just like smash cut to
What if it's a
something
walrus?
horrifying?
yeah, that was the one thought.
Yeah,
I was like,
no.
what if it is like he's dreaming or something? But anyway,
Yeah.
that's I don't know. It sounds like we agree on the problems with the movie, but we disagree on how much of an issue those problems were.
Well, for me, for me, the thing is that the problems were a real issue with the movie. It picked up a lot though with the walrus fight scene. That's the point when the movie really grabbed me again. And that's the point where I was like, okay, now I'm starting to love this movie again. Whereas before that, I was kind of like,
Fleetwood Mac comes on the soundtrack.
What's that? What's that, Nick?
I said you got the Fleetwood Mac song coming on the soundtrack.
Yeah, exactly. I think that was the point when I decided that I was gonna love this movie because up till then I was thinking like, oh, I don't know, the opening was really really strong. The middle has kind of been losing me, but once they hit that point, I'm like, oh, okay, this scene alone is worth the price of admission.
Yeah, I don't know. By that point, I was sort of rolling my eyes at it. But that's probably just a difference in taste by the end. I really did enjoy the beginning of it, and then it just sort of the rest of it fell flat. I don't know.
I feel like I could be wrong on this, but I feel like I'm surprised that Paul appears to have such kind of a muted reaction to the actual suit, because I'll admit, like, the suit, the image of the suit, and then like the being able to recall Justin Long's walrus call in my head is like still like weirds me out, right now. And I think actually that's the most disturbing part in the movie is not like the fact that he was like stitched together, it's the fact that his tongue was taken out. Like, to me, that is the part that freaks me out the most when I think about it. And he's just there, like, he doesn't talk as a walrus. Like, it's just like
The suit didn't freak me out too much because honestly that whole like practical prosthetic makeup thing that it reminded me of, and I think I told Joe this, it reminded me of the Penguin from Batman Returns. It's just like, oh, that's actually
a pretty good way of putting it.
It's like this
I
is.
thought about that because I was trying to think of ways to describe it, and I was just like, imagine Justin Long's eyes on the most demented version of a Saturday morning walrus, like a cartoon walrus. That's a pretty good way of putting it.
It's like this is really gross and weird, but it's not like it's also really cartoony, so I don't really care that much.
It's a big rubber costume.
But that's yeah. Oh, what I was gonna say, one thing I did appreciate about the movie was it didn't linger. It didn't linger like obnoxiously long on the truly grotesque stuff. It sort of teased you with it just enough to make you super uncomfortable, and then showed you it to make you like just enough to make you grossed out. So I appreciated that, and I also
or laugh. Like I think that. Well, I was gonna say like the moment when they reveal that he's missing his leg, I think was actually really funny. Like, it's terrifying. Like, if I was in that situation, that would be the scariest thing ever. But I think it's a combination of like they do that, like the snap zoom. They use the snap zoom a lot in the movie for reveals, which is kind of funny because it's just, I don't know, it makes me think of like those strange like 70s movies. But then I think it's that on top of like Michael Park's reaction where he's like, "Oh, just a spider bit you," whatever, and him just like trying to play it up.
Well, what I was gonna say was the one other thing I appreciated about the movie was that it didn't just like it did have a little bit of like, this guy is an animal and he's actually becoming an animal. Like they had a little bit more to the movie in terms of theme than I was expecting. So I do, and I guess that's to be expected from Kevin Smith in some way, because he's a pretty, although I probably disagree with him on almost everything, I think he's a pretty intelligent guy. So I don't know. I'd still say it's an okay movie. I
think it definitely.
Go ahead.
I think it's definitely like a barometer movie. Like, I think if you could show this movie to a bunch of different people and I think you would learn a lot just by the reactions to the movie. Like it's like you said, like it's a very hard movie for people to recommend, but I feel like this is just the beginning in terms of audience reactions. I think when this movie goes to Netflix or goes to Redbox, that's when the movie is going to get bigger. That's when you're going to get like the actual reactions to the movie. Because I feel like most people who've seen it now are the people who like kind of knew what to expect going in, or were like Kevin Smith fans or whatever. So I'm more looking forward to like 6 months from now when this movie comes out on home video, and unsuspecting people get a chance to check it out, because I think it is one of those movies that kind of like, we can talk about it all day, but it's one of those movies that in the end it's like you just have to see for yourself, you know.
I think people are going to turn it off because I think it's kind of boring halfway through. But anyway, we do have to sort of close things up. So any last thoughts on this? No? Okay.
I guess what more can you say about the movie? Just kind of a final thought that one scene that you mentioned earlier, Nick. By the way, outside of the walrus fight scene, I think that whole dialogue between Michael Parks and Justin Long is probably one of my favorite parts of the movie, just because of kind of like how crazy the conversation gets at the longer it goes on. I'm not, like, for instance, he's like, oh no, call a doctor. Oh, he took all the phones out of the building.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Kind of like how bizarre that conversation goes is just really, really funny to me. I don't know. Something about it was just one of the funniest scenes of the movie. So yeah, it's a bizarre movie. It's very much a cult movie, a midnight release kind of thing. I recommend it to some people, not most people probably, but I enjoyed it.
All right. Well, that's going to bring us to the end of our podcast for this week. You can find more of our podcasts on our website, the-letterbox.com, as well as film news. And, well, we don't really do film news, do we, guys? We do, like, editorials and analysis and things like that. So you can check that stuff out on there. We'll have some new stuff up this week. Finally, you can also find our podcast on iTunes just by searching for Outside the Letterbox. Leave us a review on iTunes or a comment on our site. Nick, where can people find you online?
You can find me on Twitter at Shout92.
And Joe?
You can find me on Twitter now. I actually changed my Twitter account. It's Film Illiterates on Twitter.
Oh, nobody's going to be able to spell that.
Nobody.
All three of our listeners are not going to be able to spell that.
All our listeners aren't going to be able to spell it because they're illiterates.
Oh, they are.
You just.
Well, anyways, if it helps.
Our only three listeners, Nick.
If it helps, film ILLITERATES.
Okay. And you can follow me at PFDuda, DUDA, on Twitter.
That's complicated.
Yeah, exactly. All right, that's it for this week, guys. We'll see you soon.
Alrighty.